Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is 𝐬𝐿.
And I'm Danny.
And this is our 67th episode. Thanks so much everyone for tuning in to another episode. We love to have you here. We love to keep the discussion going. Hope everything is all right in your world. We got some big changes going on over here. Well, we've been training in our garage because we've been fortunate enough to have a sick setup there, just the way it's worked out for us. And we definitely feel for those who have not been fortunate enough to have setups where you're at. However, we've gotten to a place where it's just too cold to train inside. I mean, it's like, I don't know.
Do you mean it's too cold to train in the garage? Because
Yeah.
that's not inside. It's outside.
Right. I mean, like, I'm not really motivated to train with a cold bar on my back, or just, I need to get out of the house, basically.
It's already dropping into the 30s some days. So, like, if you're not in the gym right at noon, you're going to be really cold. And I hate being cold. I truly hate being cold. So we had a conversation and we decided to go check out our gyms again. They've been open here since June, I think, but we decided to not go back because we had the equipment that we needed and we just didn't think it was the most responsible thing to do. So we decided to go check them out, and we actually have had memberships to 3 gyms in our town, and we went to check out all 3 of them. Well, actually, we didn't check out one of them. One of them was I just could see on Instagram they were holding like full classes with no masks, and I was like, nope. And then there was the other gym that they charge $10 a month. It's not a Planet Fitness. It's a legit gym with the best equipment in town. They charge $10 a month, and I was like, please let them be adhering to the guidelines. Please, for the love of God. And they were not following guidelines. There were lots of people in there that clearly didn't live together, training together without masks on and all that jazz. And that kind of sucked because I was really looking forward to getting back to that equipment. But then, just like Goldilocks, we went to the 3rd gym, which unfortunately is the most expensive gym, Super Gucci gym. But because it's a Super Gucci gym, they have a ton of space, including basketball courts and an indoor track, and they actually took all of their equipment and spaced it out. So in addition to spacing everything out, you also have to wear masks, and it actually felt significantly safer than any grocery store I've been to in the last 7 months. So we decided to go back to that one.
Mostly, yeah. And I'm kind of ashamed to say this because I pride myself on being an extrovert. I felt pretty drained. Like, not from the fatigue of training on different equipment that's arguably better than the equipment in our gym, from actually being around people.
Well, that's weird. That's the first time you've said that to me.
Right. And I was having a conversation with my pops, and I was like, yo, I love being around people. And I mean, it's not like I was there to chat it up, but just like it usually energizes me. But just because I've been so used to, in that particular space, training on my own, even without you, I mean, like, because we have different schedules. So we've been training on our own at different times during the day in our gym. And I've just become familiar with that, and that's what makes me feel energized as of late. And so then just going to the gym, even without speaking to a single soul, leaving the gym, I'm like, my gosh, I literally feel drained from being around other people.
How the turntables.
How the turntables?
It's from The Office. It's an Office reference. No, that's really interesting. See, I understand that a lot of people hate the masks and they're uncomfortable, but I kind of love the masks. Like, I'm okay if we don't go back to not wearing masks in public for so many reasons. The masks in 6 feet, like, I will take that any day. I don't like people in my personal space. 𝐬𝐿 can attest to that. I hate it. I get antsy waiting in grocery lines, and now I don't anymore because nobody is right near me. I don't have to smile at anybody. Nobody makes eye contact anymore, it seems, or I'm okay with it. And this sounds like I hate people. I don't hate people. I love people. I work with people. My whole job revolves around other people, but I just need my space. That's all.
Right. Somehow I've managed to weasel my way over the past 10 years into your space.
You're like a fungus.
Yeah, it doesn't go away at this point. We're in too deep.
So what are we talking about today, Giacomo?
Training with intelligence. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily training with a purpose and progressive overload. It's a matter of programming your training in a responsible way. It means thinking about what you do before you get to the gym, planning how you're going to structure your training for the year and realizing that that is subject to change, and also being present when you're inside of the gym. Oh, and after your training, recovery. Like, there's so many different facets of what it means to train intelligently.
Well, I'm going to let you lead this conversation because I haven't thought too hard about this before we sat down to talk about it. So go ahead. What exactly do you want to talk about?
I feel like when someone gets into bodybuilding or hypertrophy style training, if you will, the reward in the beginning is so great that it doesn't really encourage the lifter to focus on optimizing their training.
To put that in another way, a brand new lifter can go into the gym and do basically anything and get results. That's a really, really important point. You know, no one says it. No one's going to be like, hey, noob, you could go in there and just like throw some weight around like a moron with no regard and you're still going to look better. Nobody lets you know that. So then what happens? You go in the gym, you do whatever the hell you feel like, you look better. So you think that the next thing to do is continue going to the gym and doing whatever the hell you feel like, not realizing that actually that was your newbie phase. You kind of blew it. Good job. We all did it, right? Mm-hmm. We all did it because you just go in there and start doing something and you're like, hey, this is working. I'm going to keep coming in here and doing some random shit. But it stops working after a while. And then what?
Well, you're basically going to be a victim of scoliosis, which there is no known cure for. It basically means that you go in, you want to get your pump on, and you can never have enough of a pump. And when I break that down into bro-like terms...
How could you possibly break it down into more bro-like terms than what you just said?
Oh, I can keep going with this, believe you me.
Oh my God.
How many reps can you pump out by increasing the weight as fast as possible while slowing down the range of motion? Essentially, you're just chasing lifting as heavy weight as you possibly can.
Shortening the range of motion?
Yeah, just going in and lifting without purpose. Just addicted, essentially, to trying to, I don't know, get a pump on at any cost. Because you cannot get those kinds of gains you got over the course of the first 9 months ever again. And the law of diminishing returns, as many of us already know, is a thing. And it's like you're chasing less and less muscle gain and you have to try harder and harder to get it.
I think when people hit that first plateau, they think, well, I just did some random stuff, so more random stuff must be better. So maybe if they were coming in and doing some, I don't know, just random workout they downloaded off of bodybuilding.com or something, they were doing 3 sets of everything. And they're like, well, now I'm just going to do 5 sets of everything. Or I'm going to add more leg exercises or more chest exercises. And then eventually you have this like weird Frankenstein type of program with so many exercises and so many sets on it because you think that that must be the way to progress. And there's some truth to this, of course, like increasing volume, which is... Oh, I'm getting way ahead of myself. This happens to me sometimes, guys. Increasing volume. Volume is the number of sets you do times the number of reps you do times the number of weight that you do. So if I did 3 sets of 10 reps of a bicep curl with 10 pounds, that is 300 pounds. I did 300 pounds of volume for that bicep curl. If I come in a month later and do 400 pounds of volume, that would be increasing my volume. So if I did 4 sets of 10 with 10 pounds, I would have increased my volume. Increasing volume is one way to progress, but it has to be strategic. And I think that is something that can be said for all of this. It has to be strategic. You're not going to get better at what you're doing. You're not going to build muscle past a certain point in the newbie phase where you could literally do jumping jacks probably and nothing else and improve your physique. It has to be strategic.
Yeah, it's as simple as that, but it's also not so simple. I do feel like some of it is an art form and some of it is just cold hard science. You can't add an unlimited amount of sets and reps. You just can't keep...
Or exercises.
Or exercises. You can't just like double, triple, quadruple exercises, double, triple, quadruple sets and reps. It doesn't make sense, right? So that is an argument against intensity going up.
What's intensity?
Intensity.
See, do you see how we're ahead of ourselves already?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, programming theory can be deconstructed to the days long. The point is that you can produce a certain framework for your training that will allow you to progress with volume, intensity, and frequency over the course of time, but never all at the same time, and sometimes it's a delicate balance.
So I'm strongly considering, I have had this video in my mind for a while, of making this YouTube video that explains volume, intensity, and frequency, because they are three very, very, very important training variables that I don't think that people understand super well, or you can understand what they are. So volume, I explained, set times reps times weight. Intensity is the actual amount of weight on the bar as it pertains to your 1 rep max. Is probably the best. But the easiest way to think about it is how heavy is the thing that you're lifting. So I could do 3 sets of 10 with 10 pounds for bicep curls, or I could do 3 sets of 5 with 20 pounds on bicep curls, and it would be the same volume but a higher intensity. And then frequency is the other variable, and frequency is a little bit simpler to understand. It's how frequently do you train that body part or that exercise per week. So do I do those bicep curls once a week? Do I do them twice a week? Because that changes the volume significantly. So the thing about these 3 variables is they're all connected. They have to be connected. When one changes, another changes by default. If I increase the intensity, if I increase the amount of weight that I'm lifting on the bar, then my volume is going to go up. If I decide I'm going to add a second leg day to the week, my volume is going to go up. If my volume and my frequency go up, I'm probably not going to be able to lift quite as heavy, so my intensity has to come down. They're completely intertwined all the time, but I don't think a lot of people take that into consideration when they're hitting the gym because, and I've said this before, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If the only tool you have is add more, add more, add more, you're just going to keep adding more and adding more and adding more. And what happens, you are so fatigued that you actually have more fatigue than fitness. You're in a fatigue hole. You can't recover, and you actually start moving backwards.
Right. It's hard to accept that in hindsight when it's easy to blame programming and not being able to keep up with your programming. Because say you walk into the gym and it's like, okay, well, I'm just getting it in and I'm not recovering and I'm too fatigued. And you look back and it's like, oh, my form is crap, so I'm just going to fix my form. Well, yes, that's perhaps true. Your form becomes compromised and you need to keep working towards technical mastery. But then you have to think to yourself, why is your form being compromised? Well, you're fighting a losing battle in the gym because you're literally trying to add more weight on the bar, get in more sets and more reps, and hit body parts more often, and like that's the goal. Just keep going, just keep hammering away at it. So when you take that specific example right there, and it's easy to say blame the fact that like your technique needs to continue to improve and you need to reassess it and not get lazy with it, but the reality of it is that perhaps there was some smarter programming that could have been deployed in the first place, and you would have maybe not compromise your form because you wouldn't have been overly fatigued.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hard, especially when you're new or when you're newer. And I'm not talking about that sweet newbie gains phase. I'm talking about in the first couple of years, not brand new. It's hard to tell, okay, am I plateaued because I'm pushing too hard? Or am I plateaued because I'm not pushing hard enough? And most people, their knee-jerk reaction is, The type of people that go to the gym multiple days per week are the same type of people that their knee-jerk reaction is going to be, well, I'm just not pushing hard enough. I have to push harder. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it is the case. Sometimes you're plateaued because you're not giving your body enough stimulus to change, to adapt in the ways that you want it to. But you can't just assume one way or the other. You need to approach the program that you're using with some forethought. Or I mean, even if you're buying a program or downloading a program from somebody else, make sure that it is at least fairly sound. I mean, there's a million ways to write a program. There's no one program that is the best program of all times. There are thousands of programs out there that are good, that are really, really good, and that whoever wrote them has put the thought into these variables in the first place for you. So it's not like you have to write this from scratch. But beware, there are also a lot of programs out there that are absolutely garbage as well.
And even the best written program has holes in it, and you might wind up having some of those holes hurt you more than help you. And
even the worst programs, like we said at the beginning, are still going to work really well for the untrained individual. It's tough. I actually think training theory is significantly more complicated than nutrition theory. Nutrition theory is so straightforward, in my opinion. It's so obvious. I want to be bigger. I need to eat more. I want to be smaller. I need to eat less. There's some nuance to it, but like that's it. Calories in, calories out. Boom. You just figured out a huge part of it. The mental side of it, that's more complicated. But training theory, there's so many moving parts.
So volume, intensity, and frequency. There is a ton to unpack there. Perhaps a whole different podcast, YouTube series, what have you.
I want to do a YouTube video because I have a visual in my mind that I think is going to help people understand these better. But the next thing, and we do talk about this on the podcast all the time, is progression. You can't just go into the gym and do the same thing every day. You have to actually progress. You need to be increasing. There's so many different ways you could progress. I don't even want to say increasing. Progressive overload. You need to be doing more work over time, basically. You can do this so many ways. You can do this by lifting a little bit more weight. You could do this by slowing down your reps. You can do this by increasing your range of motion. You could do this by adding a set. There's so many different ways that you can be increasing the amount of work that you're doing over time, but without that, you will not be making any progress. You will be forever plateaued.
So the thought process here is to focus on progressing your workouts as opposed to repeating them over and over again. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, not particularly, because that is a big problem where people go to the gym and they do a different workout every time they go to the gym. They're doing something completely new. And it's like, whoa, don't do that. This is super popular on Instagram with those freaking swipe workouts. Oh, I'm going to do so-and-so swipe workout today. It's like, oh my God, don't you have a program? No? Oh. And I get it. There's like something to be said for staying interested. You need to stay interested in what you're doing or you're not going to do it. So do what you have to do. But if you can stick with one training program for like anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, I would say. People might be like, 12 weeks? Yes, absolutely. I have run the same program for 6 months at a time sometimes, and those were the best growth phases of my life, and I wasn't new.
So where do you find the joy as opposed to the results after the fact in your training when you're repeating the same thing over and over?
The joy for me is in the results. The joy is in getting better at the movements. The joy is in going into the gym and knowing that I'm stronger at these things every time. And then with some of these smaller movements, so when I say getting better at these things all the time, I'm talking about my big compound movements, which should make up a big chunk of your training. Compound movements, squats, bench presses, overhead presses, deadlifts, hip hinges of some kind, pull-ups, pull-downs, rows. These are the biggins, right? And you want to pick some of those and stick with them and get really, really good at those movements. Some of the smaller movements, the movements for like your calves or your rear delts or your biceps or your triceps or your lateral heads of your shoulder, some finer glute work like kickbacks. Like in my opinion, you can play with those a lot more. You might find one that you really love and you want to stick with for a long time and get good at, but you have more wiggle wiggle room to play with those. You can go ahead and play with your squats and deadlifts and leg presses, but I don't think it's smart. I think you need to give your brain a chance to neurologically adapt to these movements because there's a lot going on with them. And strength is a skill, and you need to practice that skill to get better at it. And when you're constantly changing your exercises, you're not giving yourself a chance to get good at them. So when I say you need to be doing more every time you go to the gym, I don't mean you need to be doing something different every time you go to the gym. I mean, maybe last week you squatted 125, but this week you could squat 130. You're doing more. 5 pounds more doesn't sound like a lot, but again, what if this is 3 sets of 10? That's 5 pounds times 10 is 50 times 3. That's an extra 150 pounds you actually lifted just with your squats this week.
Right. And then another example, without being able to tangibly see the weight go up, I do personally feel a lot of joy when I notice my movements improve. And I get in my own way when I can't see it and I just go into the gym and I feel like, oh gosh, I'm just repeating the same thing and this sucks because I'm probably not making any progress.
So you get bored.
But I do it anyway because I also find happiness in having the results. I believe that it's helping, so I just trust the process. But that proof is pretty important. So if you get in where I'm going, doing those, we'll say video analysis, right, where I could also assess my form and improve upon it, it's important. However, it's also a way of having your own training journal. When you do take videos of different exercises, you are literally creating your own training journal where you can see how you're able to have better force production, better time under tension, better movements, and a greater range of motion. And that kind of stuff is really damned important.
Yeah, I remember actually Giacomo taught me how to squat, guys, believe it or not, like with a barbell on my back, because it was just not something that I learned, which I mentioned in my recent YouTube video about my early fitness journey. He took a picture of me squatting or something, and it is horrible. My form was so bad. Not because I wasn't trying, I just couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't do it, not even with the plain barbell on my back. I couldn't get into the right positions. And I remember when I was learning, I had to think, okay, keep your head here and your eyes looking here, and you want to keep those elbows down and in line with the bar, and sit your hips back, break at the hips first, come down, but not too far. Like, all of that stuff was going through my head the whole time. You know what goes in my head when I squat now? Squat. That's it. It's not a very strong squat, but the form is pretty dang good. I'm pretty pleased with that form. I can just drop right into it. That's from practice. If I had just kept bopping around with different leg exercises every time I went to the gym, I might never have gotten really good at my squat form. You brought up a really good point about, like, I get bored, but I do it anyway because the results bring me joy. And that's what you need to ask yourself. I'm not saying Giacomo's answer is the right answer. Some people go to the gym and exercise just because they like being there doing something. They like lifting. They want to do this exercise today and that exercise tomorrow. So although no, it is not the optimal way to get results to jump around and program hop, is what they call it. If that is what keeps you happy and that's what keeps you in the gym, I'd rather you do that than nothing any day of the week. But if you're program hopping and doing something different every time you go to the gym and you're getting frustrated because you're not getting results, that is probably a big reason why.
So take that time, get the activity and the routine ingrained, and then eventually assess and reassess, and you come to a place where you're willing to sacrifice for the sake of specificity because those results are that important to you.
So let's give some general guidelines here. And these guidelines are taken from the Muscle and Strength Pyramid, written by Eric Helms and Andrea Valdez. I absolutely 100% recommend reading these books. If this is something that is interesting to you, I think it does an outstanding job explaining some really, really complex theories in a way that's pretty easy to digest. And it's one of my favorite things about Eric Helms, and this book definitely fits that bill. General recommendations for volume, like how much volume should you be doing? You should be doing 40 to 70 reps per muscle group or movement per session. So 40 to 70 reps. So that's like 4 sets of 10 or 4 sets of even 15 would put you at 60 reps, right? If you're new, err on the lower side of these. So if you're brand new, 40 reps per muscle group. When I say 2 sets of 10, let's say that's a pull down in a row. That's 2 sets of pull downs and 2 sets of rows at 10. That sounds like nothing, right? But if you start there, then you can progress from there. Okay, so 40 to 70 reps per muscle group per session. Intensity, this is the amount of weight on the bar, like how heavy is what you're lifting. This is gonna come down to your goal. Is your main goal to build muscle? Most people listening to this podcast, it's probably gonna be that. Or is your main goal to build strength? There's still gonna be plenty of people who that's their main goal. If your main goal is to build muscle, most of your work should be done in the 6 to 15 rep range. Anywhere from 6 to 15. So that could be 6 to 10 or 8 to 12 or 12 to 15, 6 to 15. About 3/4 of your work should be done there. And then the other quarter should be done in like a 1 to 6 rep range, the heavy rep range. But if your main goal is strength, flip-flop that. 3/4 of your work should be done in the 1 to 6 rep range, and the rest can be in that 6 to 15 rep range. And then for frequency, the recommendation is train each muscle group 2 to 3 times per week. This is pretty standard across the board at this point. Training a muscle group once per week is not the best way to get it to grow or respond. If you're happy with a certain muscle group and you just want to maintain it while you bring other stuff up, you can train it once a week. But if you actually want to bring something up 2 to 3 times per week, VIF recommendations.
That pretty much breaks down how to program for the training block itself and the importance of progression, right? Repeating a certain basic, like, hey, these are like your 6 exercises, build around them, etc., etc. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know what they are. The next thing that is really important is to consider fatigue management. And this is where I feel like there's some real opportunity to think about one's lifestyle while also on a fundamental level making sure that you take a break from training in between training blocks. And I don't mean like to not train, although it's not a bad idea to take a week or 2 off once or twice a year. I mean to program in deloads for a number of reasons.
Explain what a deload is.
A deload is when you lower the intensity or the volume of your training while still repeating the training block for the most part.
It's an easy training week.
Yeah. Exactly.
A really easy training week.
Like, let's say and there's so many different ways to program for this. You can say lower the working weights by like 20, 30%. So in other words, if you usually have 100 pounds in the bar that week, when you're doing your deload, throw 70 pounds in the bar, and etc., etc. Another way would be like, hey, if you've been doing this training block for say 12 weeks, why don't you choose the working weights that you did on week 1 on week 13? And another way to do it is while you're lowering the intensity, you can challenge yourself in other ways, right? You can change up the exercises a little bit. If you're usually doing a conventional deadlift, you can do a sumo deadlift. So there's ways to still challenge yourself and be creative with your deloads. And there's other things that you can do with that free time too. Because I feel like there's some frustration. It's like, okay, well, I'm just wasting my time and I'm not motivated here and I'm just gonna half-ass my deload. One, before I go too much on this tangent, let's bring it to the actual point. A deload is fatigue management. A deload gives your body a chance to catch up with the beatdown that you've been giving it for anywhere from 4 to 24 weeks, depending on how advanced you are. The more advanced you become with your training, the better your body is going to be at adapting to it. Both a good and a bad thing. The bad part about adapting to training is that you no longer get an inflammatory response after you train for several days at a time. That inflammatory response is when the magic happens. It's where the magic happens. Right after training, your muscles break down, and the longer that they take to rebuild, the more of an opportunity you have to gain muscle, that muscle protein synthesis process. The longer you train, the more efficient your body becomes. Just like your brain becomes efficient at things and you have to continue to challenge it in new ways, you gotta do the same thing with your body. If you don't give yourself a chance to take a break from training and lower the weights, your body will just be adapted to doing what it's doing. It will be really good at that activity, but you won't be getting the kind of output that you want. You won't be getting that muscle protein synthesis where your muscles are able to repair and grow. If you give yourself a chance to desensitize yourself from the training, you encourage the body to be able to not be as adaptable. I know, this is a whole nother tangent. But anyways, the other thought process here is that you have a chance to evaluate other things. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that the more advanced you become, the more often you have to deload. That was a long-winded way of getting to that point. Sorry about that. Moving forward, the thing that you can do that is really neat aside from manage your fatigue is you can evaluate where you've been at. Where have you gotten with this training block? What kind of programming changes can you make? How fatigued do you actually feel? Because let's face it, we can go and we can go and we can go, and you can't really evaluate how fatigued you are until you scale it back just a hair. That's not you failing or getting weaker. That's you actually assessing like, oh my God, this training stress, this is what it feels like. Let's go ahead and add more on, but let's also assess what it feels like right now so we know how much more we need to handle or what kind of things we need to change. You can assess your form. You can focus on other exercises. You can work on your mobility. I mean, there's so much that you can do with that time. Or hey, you can just like focus on other priorities in your life and scale back the intensity on being focused on your training. So deloads are practical for so many reasons.
I also think that during a deload, you can take time to focus on your mobility or any body work that you want to get done or are able to get done. It's a good time for that too. You get a little bit of extra time. And the idea of a deload is to kind of take it before you need it, actually. You don't want to feel like already beat to death and then be like, yeah, I'm going to take a deload. Hopefully, you can take one just as you're kind of starting to get a little worn down. You might be able to just take a week of a deload where you go in and train lightly and recover from that like a little bit worn out situation. But if you're already beat to hell and you take a week deload and you go back and you still feel beat to hell, you probably need more than a week. You might even need to just like not train for a few days. And if you love the gym, that's a hard thing to do.
Or you might want to have a pivot block, which is basically when the next training block is in the mix, like it's one that's not as intense as the last one. That doesn't mean that you're pedaling backwards, people. It means that you're giving yourself a chance to program big picture here, right? What you can handle over the course of a year. What can you handle over the course of 5 years? What can you handle over the course of 10 years? Assessing that is easier said than done, and sometimes recovery blocks are necessary as opposed to just deloading phases in between training blocks.
So yeah, if you're going in the gym and you're confused and you're not sure if what you're doing is optimal, don't be afraid to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. We do actually have something really cool coming in the next few weeks that we hope will be helpful to people who may or may not have fallen off during this quarantine. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. There's no one right way and there's no one wrong way to train. There's a lot of right ways. There's a lot of wrong ways. You have to find the way that is best for you, but there are best practices and things that don't make so much sense. And we just want to help kind of point you in the direction of things that make it so you're enjoying yourself at the gym, but also that you're not wasting your time while you're there.
Moving on to our Q&A segment for today. Hey Danny, can I ask you a few questions about cheat meals? I remember you talking about it on your story, but I haven't seen any posts about it on your feed. My main questions are, why are they bad? How does it affect your relationship with food? Is there anything I'm missing? I've asked Google a lot of questions, but I haven't found any complexity within the answers.
So first of all, thank you for this question. This was sent to me on my Instagram from a very, very sweet gal, Amanda, who has sent me some really nice stuff. So thank you, Amanda. Okay, cheat meals. Why are they bad? I don't think that eating off plan is bad inherently. I think the term cheat meal is bad. That's probably the most concise way that I can put it, is that the term cheat literally implies that you're doing something wrong. I hate it. I have a lot of my clients, not all of them, but a lot of my clients have a free meal, and that's what we call it, a free meal. And I know, semantics, cheat meal, free meal, what's the difference? The difference is in the way that you think about it. I think it's super, super, super important the way that you think about it. A cheat meal sounds naughty and bad and like, ooh, I'm having a cheat meal. Whereas a free meal is just like, oh, this is just the meal that I have this week that I don't track or worry about. Part of this is there was more to this message that we didn't read on the air. Part of this is what you said about how you shouldn't be labeling foods as good or bad. And you shouldn't be labeling foods as good or bad, but by calling something a cheat meal, you're actually literally doing that. You're literally saying this food is bad. It's bad for me. It's bad for my goals. When I assign a free meal to somebody, it is actually a part of their program. It's an important part of their program that I want them to do, both for physiological reasons. Often I put this in there with a ballpark in my mind of how much they're probably going to eat during this meal, and it's worked into their kind of overall calorie balance. It also usually is a higher calorie day, and this helps to boost leptin theoretically, but psychologically it also gives people something to look forward to. It gives them a way to scratch that itch of certain cravings that are maybe harder to fit into their macros other days of the week. It also allows them to go out into social settings that they can go out to lunch with their mom or whatever. Maybe not right now, but they could go to a birthday party and not stress like, oh, I didn't know exactly what was in that thing that they made for me. I don't know how to track it. You don't have to stress about it. It could be argued, okay, well, why don't people just eat like that all the time then? Because a lot of people do eat like that all the time, and that's part of the reason why people aren't quite where they want to be. I don't think we should cut these free meals, so to speak, out completely, because then anytime we eat something that either doesn't really work into our macros or is off of our meal plan, then we kind of freak out. We think it's bad. We freak out. We either don't eat it ever again, which kind of errs to the side of like anorexia or orthorexia, or we say, and we just eat a ton of it because we feel like we're never going to get to have it again. So we binge on it, which leads kind of towards binge eating disorder or bulimia. Neither of these things are good. We want to make sure that we're introducing the foods that you like that aren't maybe fitness friendly in a lot of people's minds. You need to stay comfortable around birthday cake. You need to stay comfortable around pizza or peanut butter or whatever it is, because it's going to be around for the rest of your life. And you need to be able to react appropriately in those scenarios. I hope that answers your question. So I think the problem, maybe I didn't actually answer your question. I think the problem with cheat meals as they are traditionally, and I've had programs given to me where it's like, here's your meal plan. You eat this for 29 meals of your week, but on meal 30, eat whatever you want. Girl, it is not pretty. Because cheat meals are often associated with just meal plans. So during a meal plan, you're very restricted to what you're eating. And then when the reins are off for that one meal, and then on top of it, it's called a cheat, and you feel like you're cheating, you feel negative about yourself, and it leads to binging. Although I've mentioned, I do think there's a time and a place for meal plans. And I do have clients who have meal plans and a free meal, but it's always so closely monitored and worked with and worked on, because sometimes the free meal is the hardest part of someone's program. They can follow their macros or a meal plan to a T with ease, but when I say, okay, but what do you want to eat this Saturday night? And they just like freeze, like their anxiety shoots through the roof. Well, then that's what we have to work on right now. We need to make that not so stressful again. When it's framed as a cheat, it encourages eating disordered behavior. And that's the best, easiest way that I can put it. I hope that makes sense and answers your question. And that's why I didn't send you the answer on Instagram, because I knew that it was going to be that long of an answer. And hopefully it helps someone else too.
You said a mouthful. Lots of good points there.
Okay, question for 𝐶𝐭. When I'm working on dieting or trying to change my eating habits in general, I find it challenging when there are other foods in the house that tempt me. If I lived alone, it wouldn't be an issue. How do you stick to your plan when you live with someone else?
That is a very good question.
You hide Oreos in the car from me?
Oh, unfortunately, there's no one right answer for this, and it does depend on the scenario. I feel like with a housemate, it can be a little easier to distance yourself, because it's kind of like, well, yeah, it's their food, it's my food, it's kind of like understood. When you're dealing with someone who's more of a living partner, like say a husband or a girlfriend, then it becomes a little more complicated because you share food together, right? It's not like, this is my food, I'm going to write my name on it so you can't touch it, right, Danny? Or it's not like, oh, we're going to eat dinner together, but you're going to eat your thing and I'm going to eat my thing. These scenarios do pop up from time to time, but they're obviously not solutions, and it doesn't change the behavior or the acceptance that you are doing your own work and you're committing to yourself to create your own systems even while you live with someone else. It gets complicated. Let's start with food choices when you're not necessarily sharing lunch or dinner with your significant other. I think this is where it's important to have foods that are like not necessarily theirs or yours. In other words, food is food, it's meant to be shared, food is love. And if you get too territorial about it, like these are my foods and they're what I need to succeed, or those are their foods, you wind up getting into a little bit of a food fight, if you will, with your partner unintentionally. So I think it's a matter of being sensible with your portions. And if you're craving something that somebody else is, you have it in moderation. Easier said than done. I know. You can't really ask somebody to not bring their food in the house. Maybe if you're in some sort of like a super duper dieting phase, you can ask for some compromise and also realize that that person is in fact sacrificing for you. But for the most part, I think it's more along the lines of, well, you have your foods that support your goals, eat nutritionally dense foods that give you good energy, and when there are treats in the house that you didn't necessarily bring in, they're not off limits per se, and there's no harm in enjoying something here and there in moderation. It's just a matter of like, you can't control that, and sometimes if you need to not have any of them, that's fine. If you feel like you need to enjoy something here and there, that's fine too, as long as your partner's okay with sharing with you and you don't feel guilty about the fact that those foods are in the house. And if it is sort of an unsafe place, have that discussion with your partner and see if they're comfortable enough supporting you. The other thing is when you enjoy food with your respective other, I feel like it's important to bend the rules here a little bit and make some space for enjoying what someone else cooks, while also staying true to yourself and being like, okay, well, we may not have the same food preferences here, and perhaps it's okay for me to bring my food to the table and enjoy it while you're bringing your food to the table. So there needs to be a little flexibility there, essentially, if you're going to be able to be in a healthy space while you're living with someone else.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. If you are able to stop what you're doing and leave us a review, it really, really helps us to get this podcast in front of more people's eyes, and hopefully we can help get them on a path to bettering their vegan fitness journey. You can come find us on Facebook, Muscles by Brussels Radio. We would love to have you. We have a lot of great folks in there as well. And if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at VeganProteins@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again so much for tuning in. My name is Danny.
And I'm 𝐬𝐿.
And we will talk to you soon.